Welcome. If you're looking for a place to unwind, to let your mind drift, and to fall asleep to the sound of old stories, you're in the right place. Here, we explore the legends of Blizzard. Tonight, we go back to the very beginning of the Warcraft saga, before the Horde was a name spoken in fear across the kingdoms of men, before the wars that would reshape the world. We begin in a kingdom that believed itself safe, and we follow the chain of corruption, betrayal, and desperate courage that would bring it to ruin. This is the story of the First War, and the gate that started it all. So get comfortable. Close your eyes. And if this brings you peace, consider subscribing for more quiet journeys through Warcraft history. Now, let the story begin. The kingdom of Stormwind sat in the south of the Eastern Kingdoms like something built to last forever. Stone walls rose over green fields, harbours filled with trade ships from a dozen ports. Villages spread outward from the capital in every direction, each one prosperous, each one at peace. It was a kingdom that had not known a serious war in living memory, and it carried itself accordingly. King Lane Rin ruled with a steady, measured hand. His childhood friend and greatest knight Anduin Lothar commanded the armies, though there was little for armies to do beyond keeping the roads clear and the borders quiet, and watching over the kingdom from afar, from the high tower of Karajan in the Red Ridge Mountains, stood Medivh, the guardian of Tirisfal, the most powerful mortal mage the world had ever known. The Guardian's purpose had been the same for generations: to watch over Azeroth and protect it from threats that came from beyond, from the dark spaces between worlds where things far older and far hungrier than men made their plans. Medivh had inherited this charge before he was born, anointed by the collected power of the Tirisgard Order, born into a responsibility he had never asked for. What no one knew, what no one could have known, was that the threat Medivh was meant to stop had already found him. Medivh's mother, Aegwynn, had been a guardian herself, and one of the greatest. Decades before Medivh's birth, she had confronted a physical avatar of the Dark Titan Sargeras and defeated it. The victory had seemed absolute. It was not. At the moment of apparent defeat, Sargeras transferred his essence, the core of his will and his hunger, into Aegwynn herself. She carried it without knowing, and when she later conceived Medivh, that essence passed into the child. Not violently, not visibly, quietly, the way the most dangerous things always arrive. Sargeras waited inside the Guardian for decades, patient, learning, watching through Medivh's eyes as the man grew into his power, studied the arcane arts, took up his responsibilities, and came to be trusted by everyone around him. And when Medivh had reached the height of what he was capable of, Sargeras began to steer. Moving through the Guardian's mind, the Titan reached across the dimensional veil between worlds and found Draenor, a world already dying, its soil poisoned, its sky dimming, its people fracturing under the pressure of a civilization in collapse. And on that world, Sargeras found exactly who he was looking for. Gul'dan was an orc shaman who had been cast out by his clan for being physically weak. He was not a warrior. He was not a warlord. He was a small, bitter man with an enormous appetite for power and nowhere to direct it, until the Whispers found him. The Demon Lord Kil'jaeden, acting as an agent of Sargeras, had been seeding those Whispers for some time. What he offered Gul'dan was simple, knowledge, power, and purpose. What he required in return was the transformation of Draenor's orcs into an army of conquest. Gul'dan accepted without hesitation. What followed was one of the darkest chapters in Orcish history. Gul'dan organised the most ambitious and ruthless among the Orc shamans into a shadow council, a hidden body that would pull the strings of Orcish society from the shadows. He oversaw the corruption of the Orc clans through the blood of the Pit Lord Manoroth, binding an entire people to demonic will in a single act. The Orcs who drank became larger, stronger, and consumed by a rage that was not entirely their own. They became the Horde, and the Horde needed somewhere to go. This was where Medivh came in. With Sargeras guiding his hand, the Guardian used the vast arcane power of Karajan to reach across dimensions toward Draenor. Gul'dan's warlocks worked the mirror ritual from the other side. Two structures, anchored on two different worlds, forced a permanent rift between them. The dark portal erupted in the black morass, a stinking, fog-choked swamp in the far south of Stormwind's territory, and blazed with green fellfire. The first humans to see it described something that made no sense. A stone archway appearing out of nowhere, burning from the inside with light the colour of corruption. Then the Orcs came through. The horde that poured from the portal was not a mob. It was an organised military force, armoured in iron, disciplined in ways the first scouts had not anticipated, burning with demonic corruption that amplified their size and strength and aggression. Under the command of Blackhand the Destroyer, the war chief Gul'dan had placed at the head of the army. They swept through the black morass and hit the southernmost villages of Stormwind without warning. The humans had never seen anything like them. The first reports were confused. The first responses were too slow. By the time the kingdom understood the shape and scale of what it was facing, the Horde had already taken significant ground. Anduin Lothar rode to meet them. King Lane held the capital and tried to project calm for his people. But the news coming south was not calm. The Horde did not slow. It did not negotiate. It pushed north with the methodical momentum of something that had been built for exactly this purpose: to conquer and to keep conquering until there was nothing left to take. The war ground on. Months became a year. Villages became front lines. And at Karajan, Medivh's young apprentice was beginning to notice things that could not be explained away. Khadgar had arrived at the tower believing he was being given the greatest honour a student of magic could receive: apprenticeship to the Guardian himself. What he found instead was a master who vanished for days without explanation, a library that contained research no protector of Azeroth should have been pursuing, and an atmosphere in the tower that felt less like a seat of wisdom and more like a held breath. He began to investigate carefully. What he found, piece by piece, was the outline of a betrayal vast enough to end a civilization. Khadgar brought his evidence to Lothar. Together with Garona, a half-orc who had come through the portal as an ambassador of the Horde but whose allegiances had quietly shifted, they made for Karajan. Not to warn Medivh, to stop him. The confrontation at the top of the tower was desperate and brutal. What they faced was not entirely the man Khadgar had served. Sargeras blazed through Medivh's eyes. The tower shook. The fight tore through the highest chambers of Karajan before it was done. In the end, Medivh fell. Khadgar and Lothar prevailed. The corruption of the Guardian was finished, but the portal he had opened was still burning. With the truth about Medivh exposed and the Horde still advancing, Stormwind had lost its most powerful protector and gained nothing in return but the knowledge of how completely it had been betrayed. The Horde pressed its advantage. The fighting reached the capital. And in the chaos of those final days, Garona, her will overridden by the Shadow Council's magic, acting against everything she had chosen, assassinated King Lane Rin in his own throne room. The king was dead. The city was breached. Anduin Lothar gathered the survivors, soldiers, nobles, civilians, anyone who could move, and led them to the harbour. They sailed north to Lord Aeron, to the other human kingdoms, to whatever hope remained in the world. Behind them, Stormwind burned. The Horde raised its banners over the shattered walls, and in the south, the dark portal blazed on, still open, still pouring green light into the sky over the black morass. The first war was over. Stormwind had fallen. A king was dead. A Guardian's betrayal had cost the kingdom everything. And somewhere in the north, Anduin Lothar was already thinking about what came next. That story, the Second War, the Grand Alliance, the long road back south, belongs to another night. For now, let the image settle. A kingdom that was peaceful and whole, a gate that should never have been opened, and the quiet of a world that would never quite be the same again. Rest now. We'll be here when you're ready for more.